Well, thank you all for attending virtually this first meeting of the Waunakee Board of Education's Ad Hoc Committee on Equity and Inclusion. My name is Mike Brandt. I think I've probably talked to you all by phone or in person at some point over the course of the last couple of months. Because we are a publicly noticed and authorized committee by the board, everything's been noticed, and we do have a somewhat formulaic and formal way of going through initial meetings. So now that the meeting's been called to order, we have a specific agenda. It's in a bit of an odd order, actually. We wrote this down so that we'd have a roll call to introduce committee members. So I think the first way we could probably start off with is by, I guess, everyone unmuting themselves over time, or we could just do that in order and everyone can introduce themselves. This might actually be the most time-consuming part of the meeting, because what I think I suggested to everyone is that if everyone introduces themselves, they can identify where they are within the district, if they're staff or non-staff or student, if they're a community member, what area they are effectively representing, and briefly state, however long you want, as long as it's not too long, what your thoughts are about what this committee is going to be doing, what you hope to get out of it, and what you hope to accomplish from here. So my role, I look at a lot of this as I'm the identified chair, but one of the things that I hope we authorize today is our next meeting to nominate and elect a co-chair. I'm here to be more as a facilitator, because one of the main things the committee is going to be doing is making recommendations to the board. This is Tim. Tim, do you mind being the first to lead us off?
Not at all, Mike. I'm Tim Schell, Director of Secondary Curriculum and Instruction. I also coordinate our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in the district.
And Tim, you're going to be one of the administrative representatives on the committee, correct?
Yes, I'm the central office representative on the committee.
Okay. I'm just going to go on the list. Bethany Pottinger. Pottinger.
Hi, friends. So I'm a first grade teacher at Arboretum Elementary, which is where I am right now. I am super excited that this committee is getting going and that we're having the opportunity to have dialogue about equity. And one thing that really stood out to me when we had a bunch of Waunakee alumni come and talk to the teachers on a panel was the big message I was getting was, teachers, don't be afraid to talk about this, and please do talk about it. And so I felt like, yes, great, because that's what we're going to do here.
Great, thank you. And I will go next with Brian Hafer.
Hi, I'm Brian Hafer. I'm one of the Board of Education members on the committee, and this has been way too long to get this group together, but Mike and I have been talking about it probably about 2-3 months before I was even elected and came on the board. So welcome everyone. Looks like a great group. So looking forward to getting started.
Next, Kathy Kittle.
Hi, I'm Kathy Patel, and I'm a para-educator, and I've been at Heritage for the past 5 years. I'm really excited to be a part of this group. I would like to see us working on engaging our community in this dialogue also, but I think this is a great place to start.
Thanks, Kathy. I apologize for mispronouncing your last name. I'm probably going to
Oh, that's all right.
I think I mispronounced Bethany's last name too, and my excuse on that is when she taught my older son, her last name was different at the time. So next, Christy Scheppelman.
Hello, everyone. My name is Christy Scheppelman, and I am a school social worker in the district. I currently work at the high school level at the TLC building, which is sort of like our alternative ed building, and also the high school. I helped start Los Soñadores, which is our Latino leadership club.
After Rebecca back.
Yep, I'm back in. We're back on.
Okay, I'll just go where I left off, or I don't really know at what point it got cut out. But anyways, just to rewind, my name is Christy Scheppelman. I'm a school social worker at the high school level. And I work with a lot of our alternative education students, and then also started Los Soñadores, which is our Latino leadership group about 6 years ago. And I'm excited to see some system changes. I do a lot of individual work with students on issues regarding equity and racial justice and things like that, mostly through Los Soñadores, but also looking to do more systematic change and some kind of big picture changes, and hope that this group can bring us together to look at some of those systemic things that need to be addressed. And a lot of times I hear through the high school students and get lots of feedback and ideas. So I'm really excited to see some students on this panel too, because I think that they have a lot to share with us also. So nice to meet all of you.
Yeah, thank you, Christy. Now that the order is all messed up, I'll have to make sure I don't double back over anybody. Let's go next with Ophelia Whitley.
Hey, Paul Whitley. Sorry.
I was going to say that's not
Yeah.
Ophelia, but I thought it was you, Paul.
Yep. Paul Whitley. I have a daughter going into high school. I have another one going into 4K. And I guess my expectations are figuring out ways to work with the community and to incorporate the community as Waunakee grows and we start looking at other ways with the way things are going right now.
All right, thanks, Paul. Diane Rusk.
Hi there, Diane Trice-Rusk, and I am a Vienna, Township of Vienna resident, and my daughter graduated from the district a couple of years ago now, and so thanks very much for allowing me to be on this group. I think one of the things I think about is how the school district is rightly so really proud of its record of achievement, and I'm excited about what the work that's being done about thinking about student learning relative to a lot of different aspects of learning, and one of that is around history that is representative and inclusive of all populations. And I think also then that leads to just sort of the inclusion and feeling that all students see themselves in the district and have the same kind of access to the kind of opportunities that are available to Waunakee students. Thanks.
I just want to say thank you, Diane, for joining relatively late. We did have someone who moved out of the district who was going to be a representative from town of Springfield / Dane, who was not available. And we already had not had someone who was representing Vienna. So Diane was able to step in relatively late in the game. So thank you, Diane. Emily Meyer.
Hi, everybody. My name is Em Meyer. I am a 7th grade teacher at the middle school here, and I'm also a former Waunakee student as well. I attended school in the district from kindergarten through graduation, so I have an interesting perspective of both teaching here now and then also having been a student. And I want to echo what Bethany said, which is to just to reiterate that, like, our kids want to have conversations surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I have the unique perspective of also knowing a lot of alumni from the district who we all talk about these issues in our own circles, and really wish that our school experiences had provided more depth in terms of like social justice education and that kind of thing. Also really interested to hear about how we can help students navigate current events, news, things like that, and thinking about students in terms of their identity formation at middle level especially. So thank you.
Gina Pagel.
Hi, everybody. My name is Gina Pagel, and I am starting my 14th year in the district at Arboretum Elementary. I teach in our world language program, so I teach kindergarten through 4th graders in the content of social studies and in the language of Spanish. And so I bring that perspective to the table. I'm here because this is a passion of mine. It always has been, and I'm representing Arboretum as well as kind of teachers at large through the Teachers Association. I agree with lots of things that I've heard so far today, which makes me even more excited to be a part of this work. I think the lens that I am going to focus on is the primary lens just for right now, because I often hear teachers who are uncomfortable having these discussions. And I think that's true in society at large. We've really come to an understanding, especially over the summer, that conversations that can be uncomfortable can be some of the most necessary conversations to have. And I reject the notion that any of our students are too young to participate in these conversations and to address these topics. So we do what we can through our curriculum, and I'm just so excited to be a part of this from that social studies angle of my curriculum, as well as in helping our teachers to be ready to have these conversations and to move forward. Because as people have said, I've been chomping at the bit for years, and I'm excited that this time has come.
Thanks, Gina. Isabella, I think Moore. You there?
Yep. Hi, I'm Isabella Moore. I'm a student at Waunakee High School. I'm going to be a senior this year, and I'm part of the Black Student Union, so I'm representing all of the voices that can't be heard, and yeah.
What grade are you in, Isabella?
I'm a senior.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Next, Joel Lewis.
Hey, hi everyone. My name is Joel Lewis. I'm representing Westport. I have 4 kids in the school district. Actually 3. My son just turned 18 and graduated. So I ran for school board, and one of my platforms was about equity and inclusion. And it's just really important that, you know, out as a village and as a district, we focus on that. And it looks different for everybody. So that's how I got to know Mike, and just kind of the things that he was trying to do. And, you know, he came up with this committee, just kind of told me a little bit about it. And I'm just ready to just kind of tackle the work and see what we can do together, and just be part of the change.
All right, thanks, Joel. Next is Katie Grundle.
Hi, I'm Katie Grundle, Associate Principal at Prairie Elementary. I asked to be on this committee, or wanted to be part of this committee, as representation for administration. especially for our youngest learners, is I agree with Gina and the fact that it's never too young to start talking about these topics and how we can open their eyes to the things that all people can bring to our world and to our community here at Waunakee. As well as I want to think about how we can impact our teachers and their mindset and their work to ensure that culturally responsive practices occur each day within their teaching and inclusion of all students, and to see students for the things that they can bring to the classroom, and how we can ensure that we meet each of those students' needs and understand what biases we have as educators and how they impact our actions and our words. I could keep going, so I'm gonna stop there.
Next we have Laura Ostrander, who's another recent addition, also because we, I believe, did not specifically have staff representation from Prairie, and you didn't want Katie to have to cover staff and administration in the same building. So Laura, are you there?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the addition. And when this was put out last May, I was having a baby, and so I missed the invite. So I'm excited to be part of this. I've been teaching for almost 20 years, and I've taught in Reg Ed and in Special Ed in Chicago and in Madison. I love diversity. I love equity. I build my practice around it. And coming to Waunakee, I really want to see what we can do for all kids. And I'm particularly interested in how do we celebrate diversity and equity in a largely homogenous environment. And also how do we attract people from all backgrounds so that it becomes more diverse. Very excited to have students, staff members, and community in this meeting together to begin to create a vision. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thanks for reorganizing your schedule so you could make it right away. Leslie Petty.
Yes, hi, thank you. I'm Leslie Petty, and I have a 6th grader and a 12th grader in the Waunakee School District. And I have actually been involved with the high school and the middle school. I actually, this past year for Teacher in Service, held 2 workshops that actually was co-presented with a colleague of mine at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And we did 2 workshops on core concepts and building skills to enhance inclusion in the workplace. And we customized it just for educators. And one of the sort of areas that I wish to see as I continue to be engaged in diversity inclusion here in Waunakee is to hopefully see out of this committee create a framework that will help us build curricular and co-curricular programming, professional development for educators and administrators. And I think that this needs to be something that comes from the school district and work its way through each school and all aspects of our children. So that's something that I hope to see as a result of the work from this ad hoc committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. Melanie Meister.
Yep, Meister. Hi, I'm Melanie Meister. I'm one of the school psychologists in the district. I currently work at Arboretum and Heritage Elementary Schools. Everything that you all have said and already put in the space, I agree with. Basically, I've been on my own personal journey as a hopefully anti-racist educator for over a decade. I've been doing some grassroots type stuff with other educators, and I'm kind of looking for more of an avenue to make some systemic changes that have broader strokes to make some adjustments.
Thanks, Mel. I've heard Randy say your name just as Mel so many times I didn't realize I didn't know how to pronounce your last name. Sorry. Melissa Hernandez.
Hi, I'm Melissa Hernandez, and I've been in, my family and I have lived in Waunakee for about 13 years. My children
Taylor.
but not, we had a different perspective, not different, but we've lived in California, we lived in Chicago area, and we came here, and just some things that I, witnessed and saw, and would try to talk with people about different things with equity, and maybe, some issues with the school district. I just always was, kind of given, we don't talk about that. That is not true. Shut down kind of scenario. So, and we talk with our kids about equity, race, all of that. That's a topic that we talk about a lot. And so, and my children and my husband have experienced stuff in Waunakee. So when the opportunity to join this committee came up, I felt like, I should be involved in it if it works, or if I was chosen or whatever. But additionally, I am a teacher. I've taught in California, and I'm currently in MMSD Madison, and we're very much into the equity, anti-racist work as well. So.
Mike Pizani.
Hello, everybody. I'm Mike Pizani. I am a resident of Waunakee. Lived here for 12 years. I have a 6th grader and a 4th grader. Why did I join this committee? Because I'm very interested in stopping, disrupting, changing the predictable outcomes for kids in schools based on race, poverty, disability status. I've been an elementary principal for 18 years, and I also am a PhD student, and my research is focused on elementary schools that are closing the achievement gap and racial achievement gap in literacy.
Thanks, Mike. Monique Mobley.
Hello. My name is Monique Mobley. I've been working with our English language learning students for pushing 10 years now. I'm a proud first-generation American. I speak French and Spanish, and working with students everywhere from elementary when I first started working, and mostly now at the high school. That is another group of students who are looking to find their voice within our community, not only the students, but their families. And I really enjoyed working with Christy Shuppleman with the Soñadores. I think that I've grown as an educator by learning from those students. And I too was extremely proud of our graduates who spoke with Percy Brown the other day. I think that was one of the most moving experiences I've had as an educator in the last few years. And I can tell you the teachers were talking at the high school after hearing those students. So I think that, people listen, and looking forward to some good, hopeful work with this group. Thank you.
Nia Vang.
Hi, I'm Nia. I joined this committee two-pronged. I'm a parent of a soon-to-be 2nd grader in the Waunakee School District. He's going to be going to Heritage. And then secondly, I work for, although not for the Waunakee School District, I do work for Department of Public Instruction as a IT director. And so I want different perspectives on how people see our school district, how we handle these types of issues. And I'd like a better way to help my explain difficult topics to my child. And everything I've heard here is great. And I've also noticed that almost everyone in this group is connected to schools somehow, whether they're running for board or a teacher or a previous teacher of some sort. So that's I find that really interesting. For some reason, I was expecting more just, parents. Not that that's bad, just I wasn't sure what to expect. So thank you.
Pam Potter.
Yes, thank you. I'm Pam Potter. I live in Westport. I'm very honored to be part of this committee. And this is just so far looks like a really fantastic group. I have a daughter who's going to be a senior. And I got interested in this committee after reading some of the letters to the editor in the Waunakee Tribune about the occurrences of racism and anti-Semitism that had been coming out into the open. We are Jewish. We have had a wonderful experience in the Waunakee schools, being accepted by the community. So I was really kind of surprised to see that these things are simmering under the surface, but I do believe that Waunakee is now experiencing some growing pains, and we need to start addressing these issues right now. I think the time is right. I'm on the faculty, UW faculty, and I teach the two most popular courses I teach. One is on Nazi culture, and the other one is on Jewish migration from Russia to the United States. So I deal a lot in my teaching with issues of racism, xenophobia, anti-Semitism. So I'm hoping that I can bring some historical perspective, maybe some pedagogical perspectives as well. And I'd be interested to see what we can do to enhance the curriculum.
Great, thank you. Sam Kaufman.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sam Kaufman. I'm a senior at the high school. I look forward to serving with you all. I previously served on the Waunakee Housing Task Force, and I currently serve on the Dane County Parks Committee. So we work a lot with equity, access, transportation issues. So I hope that I can draw from those experiences as I'm working here. As well, I also served as a teaching assistant in the summer school program for one summer. So I hope that we can work together to tackle some of these issues together.
Thanks, Sam. And for those who don't know you, I would vouch for Sam and that he has a encyclopedic knowledge of Waunakee and the area that I find somewhat terrifying and impressive at the same time. If I have a question about anything in Waunakee, he's probably the first person who I'd ask about anything. So thanks, Sam, for being available. Stephanie Shefchik.
Hi, everyone. I think I might be the last one. I'm not sure. I'm Stephanie Shefchik. I am a special ed teacher at the high school. I live in Waunakee, and I have 2 children that go to the schools in Waunakee. Everything that everyone has said is valuable, and I echo all of it. But it's important work, and it's overdue. And I'm happy to be a part of it because there is power in education, and having this be part of our education is something that Waunakee needs to do. I'm excited to be a part of it.
Thanks, Stephanie. I think you were the last one. I believe we have most of the committee members here, although I think there's 1 or 2 that were not able to attend. In particular, one of our student representatives wasn't able to attend. Michelle Berg, who is one of the Westport representatives, was not able to attend as well, but at least she's not on the call at the moment. But other than that, I think that's pretty much everybody. So with that, that kind of concludes the section on our agenda regarding introductions of the committee members. The next agenda item is actually something that is more participatory in that we actually have to have a vote to approve the agenda. So presumably all of you have been emailed the agenda we have for today. It's fairly limited with 2 open-ended items after that. So I would request anyone making a motion to approve the agenda at this time.
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Board member showing how you make a motion. Thank you, Brian. And Sam seconded the motion. So since we're doing this via Zoom, I will ask everyone to unmute themselves, or if I'll ask all to unmute and you can say aye or nay if you don't approve the agenda. So asking you all to unmute now, all in favor of approving the agenda as written.
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, all opposed say nay. All right, so the agenda is approved. Next item on our agenda is discussion of committee scope. So for this specific item, I thought it would be prudent to pull up the actual committee charter that was authorized by the full board. So I will pull that up. Presumably all of you will have seen this. And because I'm sitting in my home office, I'm making sure I have nothing from anything in my day job up on. All right, so hopefully you can all see this specific document here. This is the language that was approved by the board previously for what the committee would be empowered to do. You'll note it was actually saved by me as version 5.0. This is actually more like version 30 at some point, but I didn't keep recommending or making new changes to that. What the task force has been charged to do is listed here. The membership explains why we are all here and why who is here have been picked. But I mean, at this point, I would simply ask committee members to raise their hands or to speak as to any of these issues as to where you think we should start, because I don't want this to be a committee that I am dictating or leading on. As I said earlier, I kind of look at my role as a facilitator, and when I talk to most of you, when calling you about being on this committee, one of the things that I told most of you was that I frankly feel that I'm probably the least qualified of all of you to be on this committee. I mean, I'm a board member, so I have a vote on something, and I'm a parent in the community, but you are all, for the most part, living in the schools on a day-to-day basis, working with students on the front lines, dealing with this, and you're in a better position to make comments on a lot of this than I am. So with that, I would just leave it open to the committee for anyone who wants to raise their hand or step forward and state what you think is important to start off with. This kind of leads directly into the next subject we have on the agenda for doing a roadmap, of which I have a very rough draft. But where anyone thinks we should start from here, I'm all open to listening to what the committee wants to do.
Would it be possible for us to see the entire, is this the entire agenda?
Yeah, I can pull up the agenda for you if you'd like to.
And I did the entire item here. It's hard to know where to start if this isn't the entire thing.
Well, this is the document, the charter that was approved by the Board of Education. So this
okay, so
specifically, this is what we're limited to, but it's very broad and was worded that way specifically. so that we can do all of these things, but I don't know precisely where we should start.
Got it.
There are some very, go ahead.
Mike, I think she was talking.
Thank
you. Yeah, that's all we have.
I would like to add, I guess, I know that some of you have actually, Joel, and I was going to point to Joel because I know he's been active with several different groups online. Some of you have probably been involved in some of that. I mean, what are you hearing? What are you feeling? You've been doing this for the last couple of months, 3-4 months. So I think that's where we should really sort of start.
This is Joel. I have just something to say. So I guess me personally, I feel like, you know, we have to deal with what's going on right now. Obviously, in our country, we have a lot of unrest, and it's obviously about race. And for me, as I think back where, you know, we had the incident with those kids shouting the N-word out of their vehicle, that happened in our community. I think that is probably the first thing that we need to just kind of tackle, because we have a lot of stuff that is like marinating, and we just want to make sure that we get ahead of it before it starts getting worse. But I do have to say that the school has been doing some great things to move forward. And I think with this ad hoc committee, I think it's just going to propel it, you know, even more so. So I guess I vote for us to start with race. You know, that could be inclusion, equity. But I feel like right now, what's more pertinent is probably race, and how do we handle it as a district.
May I add to that, please? It's Monique.
Sure, go ahead, Monique. And then how about, just to make sure that we don't have everybody shouting all at once, I saw that Dr. Petty put up like a raised hand icon. I think you can all click on that through Zoom. That might be a good way to kind of get in line from there. But go ahead, Monique, and then Ms. Petty, I'll go with you next, okay?
You know, tagging on to what Joel was saying and what was mentioned earlier when people were making introductions, I think that the discussion of race and our curriculum in our school district is something to be looked at. I mean, we heard that message over and over from students who've graduated several years back to students who are recent graduates, that they want to have a better understanding of talking about race in the schools. And that starts at the elementary level and moves all the way up to our high school level. So somehow to, you know, take a look at that, and, you know, what are some, they even threw out options of things that we could be doing differently, specifically at the high school in English and our social studies classes. Something to look at.
Thank you. Go ahead, Leslie.
Okay, Mike, I actually echo the concerns and the suggestions that's been put forth. But I do think that as we take a look at the charge to the task force, I think what we're being asked to do is overall is to review sort of the current state of the school district and advise or develop a possible plan. I think I would suggest us really gauging and perhaps doing a survey or trying to get a better understanding that would help us create an inventory, and also understanding the stakeholder voices, which means that we, you know, who are our stakeholders are our students, our teachers, and our administrators, and our parents in the community. And I think in order for us to begin looking at solutions and pretty much addressing what is currently happening in our community with social unrest, which is incredibly something that we must address, I think we need to have a starting point. And what does that look like? So we need to collect information, data, to understand. So that would be a recommendation as really a point for us to consider.
Diane?
Sorry, it took me a second to unmute. I think that the climate, and I guess this goes to a bit of what a few people have said. It strikes me that the climate that the students are experiencing themselves in is sort of a foremost issue, because if a student has to use a lot of bandwidth to deal with acts of overt or covert discrimination, that really, to me, is central to equity in performance, because students have to deal with stresses that other students don't have to deal with, and to be able to experience. And now I know when my child was in high school, and maybe this doesn't exist anymore, but every day students would have to go through the parking lot, and they would have to look at a Confederate flag. And I just kind of wonder what that impact has on students and their ability to focus when they're experiencing these things. And so I guess, to data, because some people have talked about data and surveys, getting that student voice, and since we do have some student representatives on this group that are from groups of students that will have more voices, to me, I guess that's the first conversation of sort of recognizing what is. I think, curriculum and other aspects are extremely important as well, because that's what helps support the climate. And everything else in this charge everything is important. I immediately worry about the disadvantage that students have when they are the subject of acts of oppression.
I don't know who it was between Gina and Laura who raised their hand first, so I'm gonna go
Gina
with.
can go.
All right, go ahead, Gina.
I think it was Laura, but okay. I guess if we're looking at the charge as outlined, what I'm hearing and what I would put forward myself would be a starting point of number 5. I'm hearing a lot of discussion about curriculum, but I also want to make sure that leaves space for this discussion about exploration of biases in all of us, in the teaching staff, in our students, and frankly in this committee. I would love to start with building some common understanding. I mean, when we talk about equity, what do we mean? When we talk about race, what does that mean? And perhaps to everyone on the committee, there's a common understanding, but in my discussions, as I've really focused on this a lot this summer, that hasn't been the case. So I would just encourage us to make sure that before we dive in, we kind of develop some common understandings. And then that point 5 with curriculum, as well as just making sure that we're addressing, as others have said, like student experiences right now. Like we don't want to just plan forward with curriculum for the future, but that we make sure that all kids are feeling safe and welcome right now.
Thanks, Gina. Laura, go ahead.
Thanks. So I echo everything that you just said, Gina. That's very similar to the line of thinking that I was going to share. Recently, after the Percy Brown training or presentation the other day, I asked if anybody would want to reach out to continue the conversation because there was some interest, and probably 20 people from around the district plus reached out to say, hey, I want to continue this conversation. And so I put out a very informal thing based on some suggestions, and teachers that responded, the highest interest areas were a book study to know more about the issue of equity, learning about how to refine our classroom practices, and also learning about the perspectives from people of color, among other things. And I think that capitalizing on that right now is really important with everything that's going on in society. We can't lose that. At Prairie alone, we have about 20 people interested in entering into a book study that hopefully we can get up and running. I think my biggest thing is learning how to lean into discomfort a little. It's going to be scary ground, but we're going to have to do it if we're going to face change in it. And we can do it strategically, but we can't not address it any longer. So I think naming it and working through it, starting possibly in defining those terms of equity, what is bias, how do we see it, and then thinking about it in terms of what does that look like in the classroom.
Katie.
Thank you. Gina and Laura kind of stated a lot of what I was going to say. I think that we need to first amongst us this summer doing a lot of equity work with Percy and Rainey and some other people in the Dane County area, defining what that equity work and what equity means to all of us, and making sure that we all have a common kind of ground of understanding of the historical perspectives that are impacting different races and cultures that are coming to Waunakee and that call Waunakee home, and how we ensure that those systematic things that are occurring both in school and in the community we help to tackle. But in order for that to happen, we all have to have a common understanding. And I think that also starts with our staff. Our staff have to have an understanding around race, systematic racism, around their own implicit biases, and how that impacts what they do. Because we can't make curricular decisions without us reflecting on our own implicit biases and having an understanding of the systematic racism that some of our students are facing on a daily basis. So all of these on this task force list here are very intertwined. And I don't know if identifying one of them is the perfect right direction, is maybe identifying a couple of them, but what are the first steps in each of them that we're going to be moving forward in? Because just moving forward in one and not moving forward in another at the same time may not be feasible in my mind. They kind of have to happen simultaneously.
Nia, why don't you go next?
All right, so what I hear is that we need a two-pronged approach to this then. I'm trying not to go into work mode because this is so closely school related, but I do hear Joel. I think call it out what it is. You're the singular black male here, and you're here for a reason, probably just not because you have nothing else to do, and that I hear you, and that you want something done. Because obviously what's happening right now greatly impacts you and your children. So I think as a team, maybe we could agree to take it as a two-part approach. One, that we address what's happening right now outside our doors. And then two, we address what's on this list here, broken into two parts. Our meeting's only an hour, and I apologize if I don't know in advance.
Well, if you've watched any school board meetings in the last several months, you know that they can go up to 7 hours long. But I can promise they will not be lasting that long.
Thank you.
As long as I am running it.
Yeah, I am aware how long they can go, but I usually just do the summary the night afterwards, which is terrible for me to do it, but I'm just like, I'll just take the summary. So that being said, I think we can take this in two parts. So maybe we could time box it. Let's pretend that we're going to do this for an hour, 30 minutes. For the social issues, another 30 minutes to address all of the items on here. And then the other thing I would like to start off with, and I hear you, Gina, is that we need to set a baseline. Right now at the very high level of DP, I can tell you that we are having race discussions. We are talking about this. Carolyn Stafford Taylor, it's a very, very uncomfortable conversation, and we need to set, before we can go forward, we need to set a baseline. If you're here, you have to be ready to be uncomfortable because these are really difficult conversations. and we have to make this a safe space for everyone to speak. I'm going through this right now, and let me tell you, I work as an IT director in a department full of middle-aged white males. This is a very, very difficult conversation to have and lead. And so I think we have to set the ground first before we can have that conversation. And then we have to apply the conversation to this item here. That's just me framing it in my mind while listening to you guys. Sorry for going into work mode.
That works. Thank you, Nia. I think Mel, you were next.
Sounds good. Thank you. So one of the messages I heard from our students in the student panel that we experienced was that they're not seeing teachers and staff that reflect their own racial identities. So I do feel like focusing on attracting, hiring, and maintaining staff members of color would be very important. I feel like that could be a cyclical impact where if we have children of color seeing teachers of color, then maybe they will see that as a career path for them and perhaps return to us as professionals in the future. When I'm reading things about this committee, looking at curriculum, I want to make sure that we're expanding it to also consider instructional practices that our teachers are using, as well as assessments that we're using. So I'm thinking district assessments, but I'm also kind of going up the ladder to like special education assessments and how we're identifying children with impairments. We are disproportional in this district, and I think that's something we need to be aware of, is how the tiers kind of build off of each other. And then finally, you've heard some staff members talk about there is a lot of interest in multiple buildings from some educators that are ready to go. Maybe they have some former experience of anti-racist work in their classroom, something that I want the committee to be aware of, and perhaps maybe there's an action item we can do, is that the staff members need to feel like they're supported by the district and the board if they talk about race explicitly. There's a lot of fear that they're going to be labeled as trying to indoctrinate students, especially our youngest learners. They're fearful that they might feel some repercussions if they do those conversations. So I think staff are looking for some protections that people have their back if they start having these explicit conversations with their students.
Thank you, Mel. That was well said. And Mike, I accidentally lowered your hand, but go ahead. Now you're next.
No worries. I actually thought I did that, so I thought I did something wrong. It goes along the same lines that some other folks talked about gathering data, but another possible venue or tool is an equity audit. So it hit on what the person before me was saying, looking at outcomes at all kinds of different levels, from staffing levels to overrepresentation of kids in special ed, to just gathering that information as baseline to also help us identify where we want to go as a possible next step, in addition to potentially some of that community survey data.
Thanks, Mike. So I guess I want to kind of task force is charged with. For the most part, this document has one voice, and it's largely mine because I drafted it. And I'm not particularly comfortable with that. I think it could probably be better, but I don't necessarily know how it can be. And I think the people who had some input in it were largely all Tim, who's still on the call, Kurt Ely, and a little bit from Brian Gabarski and Human Resources. So I guess the question I would have to go off of this is there more that can be done on this? And I really appreciate, and I'll bring up the idea of an action item because that's something useful we can bring back to the board right away. Are there things that can be different about what the task force is even already directed to do, or things that could be added to this to improve upon it? Because this shouldn't be the only thing we're limited to. I guess I'm asking, is there a way that this can even be worded better to do more? Go ahead, Joel.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I look at this as a document that's living, right? So I think it should adapt as we adapt. There are going to be many things that come about. I mean, I have a list of things that we should probably at least consider and address and just kind of have those discussions. But I think it's as we move on as a committee, I think if we're able to, I think, you know, we already have the charge, but just kind of figuring out what that looks like in terms of verbiage, right? So I think as long as we're not just in a box and we're limited, I think as we adapt, the document adapts.
Okay, I'm seeing a lot of nods. Mike, you want to join in?
A pattern that I'm hearing too is the student experience pre-K-12. So like increasing the quality of that from kids of color and white kids so that they're have more comfort in talking about difficult conversations either way. So kids of color that have experienced negative situations, like what are the resources they have, where do they go, how there's usually, from my experience, an interest in helping make that situation better and making sure that there's venues for that. It sounds like there may be some of those things at the high school, but what about at the other levels? And then I think another possible idea to consider is specifically explicit student outcomes. So, you know, one of the goals of any school district is for to address student achievement, and we don't have like student achievement specifically in there. Are we targeting specific groups? What do we want from that student achievement?
Leslie, go ahead.
So when I take a look at the charge, and I do agree with Joel about it should be sort of a living document that will continue to evolve as we continue to do the work. But I do think that it would be helpful to have sort of a purpose statement to this document. And nowhere on this document, with the exception of the title, Inclusion and Equity, you really don't have anything about diversity, equity, and inclusion anyplace else. So if you were to take off the heading, you would never know that this is a document, that this is a charge for a committee whose work is to enhance diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we need to, we definitely, I mean, it's more of tactical and action, review, develop, and then report. But I think what is really important is to hone down on a purpose statement. What is the purpose of this group? What is the purpose? Which gives us, that purpose will also help frame out the vision of the committee, because it really doesn't stand as it is, as it does now. But I do agree with also other committee members who have, where I find it is really critical, and I'll go back to what I originally said, is that we're going to really need to do an inventory. Someone said an audit, but an inventory of where we are. We need to have a survey. We need to survey and make sure voices are represented. And another important part is a common language. How do committee members define inclusion? That may be very different from one to the other. How do we define diversity? And that's the same within the district. And I know the workshop that I did was a workshop that focused in on a common language in diversity and inclusion. So everyone had a pretty good understanding of what that means to each other. So I think that many of the suggestions, and also speaking about students with special needs, students that are basically also talk about marginalized, okay? That is very important because, you know, students who are marginalized in this community. So I think that that needs to be part of the language for the purpose as well. So that's my thoughts as we start to sort of build out or frame out the charge. Thank you.
Dr. Potter?
Yeah, I'd like to maybe propose a slight variation on all that's been discussed so far. We've been talking about, and I think the way this document is drafted as well, very much focused on outcomes and solutions, but I'm not sure we've really had an honest and open and frank discussion about what the problems are. And I imagine that each of us who is interested in being on this committee is interested in because of problems that they've observed. So I'm wondering if we might want to, I mean, I think it's pointless to work for a solution if you're not addressing what the problem is. And I think if we could come up with maybe just a running list of things that we feel are problems in this community. I think of the example of Baraboo, where I think if some of the issues of ignorance and lack of historical perspective and homogeneity of the community, if those have been nipped in the bud and addressed at, I think at the stage that we are at now, then I think Baraboo could have avoided a lot of problems.
Nia, go ahead.
Hey, I'm trying not to talk too much. I really appreciate everyone's opinion. And Dr. Potter, I think you nailed it right on the head, is to identify what problems we think we are, right? I mean, like, I think you hit it a nail on the head there. And just for to offer my services, believe it or not, I have direct access to all of the data that you are hoping for. Whether or not we collect it is another thing, but I can tell you how many minority students we have here. I can tell you how they're doing. Most of it is public record. And so anything that's public record, I can easily pull those things for you. So I don't think we need to spend a lot of time worrying about surveys and finding out, because I can provide that to you. So maybe we can shift our focus away from that. That being said, the director that actually owns that data, that leads that team that mines all of that data, actually lives in Waunakee, and it's my coworker, just in case anybody's interested. And so we see a lot of that data. I just thought I would let you guys know that. I think that Dr. Potter, I would rather start with that than worrying about surveys or data, though that stuff is very important too, but I can probably just give you that information if that's what you guys are looking for. Thank you.
Can I just step in? Just
sure, go ahead, Leslie.
In regards to the survey and data. Nia, what I was referring to is, let's find, I do agree that we can tell our own stories and our lived experience and what this means to us. I think that that is incredibly important. But I also think that we shouldn't make assumptions. And so the data that I'm referencing is actually surveying students and getting their point of view, surveying teachers and getting their point of view. I realize that we have data that's available here to us related to public data, but I'm talking about having a voice, making sure that those that we're representing, I mean, as a parent, I'm representing other parents. I like to know what other parents are thinking as they are educating their students within the school or just, really living within this community. I think that this is important. So that's when I talk about surveys, I'm talking about surveying our constituents in the community.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Absolutely.
Leslie. My apologies. My mind automatically goes to outcomes, and I'm like, oh, I have all of that data. I can tell you the outcomes. So I appreciate that. That we do not collect.
Laura, go ahead.
As we're talking, something that comes to mind that is pretty poignant. The school is a microcosm of the larger community. And in my career in mostly urban education, where I've taught in Chicago and I have taught in Madison, diversity was abundant. And for me, teaching inclusion and equity in those environments was a beautiful thing because I had something to wrap it around. Kids had an understanding of what it was, and we could celebrate those differences. Teachers could see those differences, and I could teach to it. in an environment where it is less diverse or diversity is less apparent, if you will, because when it's race, it's very apparent. It's a lot harder to figure out how to tackle those things. And so when I'm saying that, for me, how do we work within the schools if the community itself is so largely homogeneously white, if we're talking racial? And what are those systemic barriers that are making Madison schools so packed and full of needs that teachers can't keep up? Where when you go to a Waunakee school, you have a lot of resources there and a lot less need and a lot less diversity as well. So, I mean, where do you start to parse through those issues? Is it at a community place? Is it at the school place? But how do you do the schools until you have the diversity to work within, is my question. I struggle with that.
Stephanie, go ahead.
I was just thinking as I was listening to everyone is the idea of exposure. And I was kind of aligning that with what I do as a special education teacher. You know, there were years where special education students were not in regular ed classrooms and they were separate. And so I wonder if we're trying to incorporate this more into our culture and our community and our teaching practice, we have to think about how we're going to expose our students and our community. And I do think, and I'm kind of reviewing the list and thinking about when Percy Brown was speaking to us, students were saying they're not seeing teachers that look like them. They're not reading books about other cultures as much. So maybe that is a way to have difficult conversations and provide exposure in an environment that doesn't naturally provide a great deal of diversity. So I think there is maybe something to thinking about the curriculum and how we could expose our students and our community and our teachers to more diversity.
Laura, do you have something you wanted to add? I saw you raised your hand again after.
Nope, that was, it must have done on its own. I'm good.
All right.
Thank you.
Dr. Potter.
Yeah, please call me Pam. I'm just a Pam
sorry.
after all. I guess I just wanted to mention that I listened to the recording. I didn't participate, but I listened to the recording of the listening session on equity and diversity that happened a few months ago. And I have to say, my jaw dropped because the stories are out there. And I think the people, some of you may have actually participated in that meeting. It was all of these stories of problems were coming out of the woodwork. So I really think this idea of some kind of survey or maybe several of these public forums might be really, really instructive. The problem with getting students' perspectives, and maybe we can hear from the students who are here and maybe some of the educators as well, is students just don't want to talk about these things, it seems to me. And I have to, on a personal note, I really wasn't aware at all of what my daughter was experiencing until I started reading her college essays, where she started talking about how she felt excluded and different. So I just don't know if kids are, some kids obviously are, but I think the majority of kids are just not going to be all that forthcoming about experiences they have of feeling excluded or discriminated against.
All right, Joel, go ahead.
All right, just a couple things. So I guess the biggest thing is that I think we, and kind of what Pam said, we do have to have a frank conversation. One thing in my head is, why do we have the Confederate flag in the school? I have, and I know plenty of students who talk about this stuff and how they feel. And as I was going through campaigning, I had the ability to just kind of talk to people on that level, and it's there. You just have to give them the voice to do so. I agree with a lot of things that people are saying, but I feel like we need to start with the basics. And to me, the thing I also think about is before all this started, that was the same thing with Baraboo. I think I actually did make that statement. Waunakee doesn't want to be a Baraboo. And then we got into what happened with the kids in the car. But even before that, what about the Native American canvas that's in our building? You know, that's a hot topic. You know, you talk about that, people have different sides which they fall on. But I feel like we definitely have enough things to start at. But I think what we need to do is just really be honest with what we're dealing with within our schools. And then the second thing I do have to say is that we do have a student of color here, Isabella, and I don't want to point you out, but I think I would love
you guys' idea. Like, thank you guys so much. Like, I just want to like make the school like a better place, because like as I moved here in 4th grade, and like again, like being a 4th grader, you didn't really know about race. And then as I started moving up, like middle school is when I got greatly impacted, and I realized like I'm part Black. Like I have issues that most white people don't understand. So I just think like talking about like race and diversity, equity, and all that stuff is like so good. And it's just like it needs to be talked about. Because in the high school, besides like BSU or like any other of the groups, that it doesn't get talked about at all. So yeah.
All right. So I guess to kind of put a cap on that issue, I took some brief notes and kind of we can probably segue into the overall issue of doing a roadmap. So the couple things that I did want to bring up or discuss, and I'm just popping up into my Word doc here for what I was talking about. I heard, I brought the idea of electing a co-chair. I think we can do that at the next meeting. I'd bring it up now, but it's not noticed, so we can't literally do that. So if anyone is willing to serve in that, I could basically just tell you all a chair does is they sit down before a meeting and they draft up an agenda and they get it to Rebecca McDonough, who then sends out the agenda to everybody else. I would really appreciate someone helping me with that. Anyone who is willing to volunteer for that, you can either let me know by email or talk about it at our next meeting. Beyond that, I like the discussion about us doing some sort of a survey or an equity audit. I guess I'd maybe like to ask Tim if he can share some information about ways that we could send that out, because he's kind of been the survey guru to a certain extent for the district since I've been on the board. And some of these things are, beyond my understanding. Many of you may have participated, like Ms. Petty said, about an equity audit or survey before. I've never worked in that before. So that might be something for our second meeting to get into greater detail. I really appreciate the idea of a mission statement. Frankly, that never crossed my mind. I drafted this document in a way to ensure that we could get pointed in the right direction, but I also wanted to ensure that it passed and the board authorized it. So I deliberately didn't put a mission statement in there too, and I think that's great for us to come up with from here. Because I frankly don't think we need the board's approval to come up with a mission statement so long as we stick within the charge they've given us. And then beyond that, the idea has popped around. I know I talked about this with Joel and it came up here already, and I wrote it down here as basically truth and reconciliation, as an opportunity to hear some of these stories that are brought up, because it seems every time there's something online or some incident in public or in the schools, there are people that come out of the woodwork to all of a sudden report something that's happened to them or something that they've seen or witnessed that they just never brought up. And if we don't know about it, we can't prevent it from happening again. It might be prudent for us to actually have a specific meeting to have an opportunity for people in the public to come and make comment. I mean, this is a public committee authorized by the board. We didn't put anything on the agenda today for public comments, but in the future, anyone can make a public comment. If we have a listening session where anyone can come in and talk about things they've experienced, that could be useful too. So that's another avenue to get additional information. So
I have just one comment.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I have nothing against a mission statement, but I think what we're really looking at is a vision statement, somewhere where we want to go, where we need to be. The mission statement can go with it as well. But I think if we have a charge of the committee and a vision statement, it gives us somewhere where we need to be because we know we're not there yet. So.
Right. So does it, Monique, go ahead. You'll have to unmute yourself, Monique.
Sorry. I was reflecting on the idea of having this listening session, which I'm absolutely not opposed to, but it brought back the memory, and I know some members here were part of when the village hall the village board had a listening session about racism. There was a lot of stories, and those were adults speaking. So it'd be very interesting if the committee moves in that direction to, maybe take a listen to what adults were speaking about experiences within their community and, be prepared for what you're going to hear when you do it at our school level. I think the stories are there. And I thought it was very brave of the people who spoke because there was quite a variety of stories, and some of them were recent and some of them dated back for years that they held inside. So I just think that it's a good thing to do, but it's definitely opening up a very big Pandora's box. And we're going to hear a lot of stories that we will then have a need to respond to. So it was a powerful experience to hear. We can't ignore what our community is telling us.
Diane?
Yes, to that end, I'm wondering what the possibility of two things. First of all, has the district ever done a climate survey? I'm trying to rack my brain as a parent, and I think maybe I filled something out at one point, but maybe it was more curriculum focused. So I work with some others also in higher ed and a number, of institutions that I've been at. We've done climate surveys to sort of get at things that happen in the classroom that students experience and that their impact sort of in the environment. But it can also address curriculum. So that was sort of one thought, because if that data exists, it would be helpful to see it in these discussions because it might help with, prioritization. The other thing is maybe focus groups. I'm trying to think of a safe way to engage conversation, especially with students and teachers in a way. I did attend part of that village, and yes, people were extremely brave to be able to, publicly present themselves. I think they even had to give addresses and things like that. And I think just a way that we could get good information in a way that people do not feel intimidated or afraid, protecting students and being able to get, real information. I think one of the challenges about having, sort of goals and objectives and trying to give a recommendation about anything is that, if we don't have any sort of framework to measure, what we are at now, then how do we measure that later? And again, the climate issue is something that comes to me. It's hard to recruit, diversity in staff if there's a climate that people don't feel comfortable in working in. So I think I'm trying to get a little bit of where we can have good information to start off and our thinking. Although I agree that there's a ton of information out there from adults that have spoken in the community.
Brian, you're waving your head. Go ahead.
Yeah, we were both running the school board, opposite seats, but we had a lot of these discussions, and we even had a monthly discussion after our incident a few months ago. And I get the feeling, and a lot of the things that he told me about, I had no clue. And I'm not hearing anything at the board level, either being at the board about the school. So I'm still learning about what does. I think the biggest frustration I think Joel was expressing to me was there was no action. You know, there are incidents that are happening throughout the school and have been for years, but there's no action from the district or the administration. And I think that while we will unfortunately probably have another incident prior to this ad hoc committee completing their task. So I would also like to take a look at the policies and handbooks and figure out one for somebody who affects the person for whatever reason.
Laura, I think, thanks, Brian. You're chopping up at the end there, but I think I got everything. Laura, you're next.
Yeah, I want to echo. I think when I think about some sort of a listening session and talking about stories, I think stories have emotional impact, and they make us hear a perspective. What is the end goal? What would that be? Is it to have that emotional pull? I think we at this group have that. And understand that, but what is it that we're going to grab from that data to help us make action steps forward is the piece that stands out for me, because I want people to share their stories, but I want it to be productive so that it leads to change.
Kathy, go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to say that as we're gathering this information, if we have, like, I have a daughter who is a junior and she's seeing these events, like, we have to empower them to do something, to be able to express themselves or find a way to support their peers. And how are we going to do that? Because they need this information. Like, we took my daughter to the Black Lives Matter protests, and she didn't realize that that was something that people could just go do. So I think it's important to have those conversations, but to empower the kids. Thank you.
Leslie, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate hearing, you know, where do we go from here, and what do we do when we get this information, when we receive this information, you know, from these focus groups and from hearing the testimonies. And quite frankly, we do have to hear about the lived experiences. So going back, and I don't want to belabor this much more, but I do think that what I mentioned earlier, a mission statement is a purpose statement. What is the purpose of this group? And a vision statement actually comes through with the goals. So I think having both is not a bad idea. So you have a purpose and you have your goals, because that's what a vision statement is about. And I think once we establish sort of our footprint as a committee, we can easily ask those questions. When we hear about lived experiences, when we hear about concerns, I mean, that is the driving force. That's, if you will, our roadmap. That's part of our roadmap, is understanding who we are and what we stand for collectively, because we all have different lived experiences. Not only that, there are areas that do need to be, that we really need to immediately address, that perhaps maybe that won't come out in a survey or in a focus group, but there are areas that that has been lingering for a long time that we've continued to turn a blind eye to. And that's where we have to have those tough, not only discussions, but tough decisions to say, okay, no more. This is it, as Joel has mentioned.
Great. With all that discussion, I have a couple of questions that I just wanted to put to the committee too. One, I think I already know the answer to, but I want to let everyone say their piece on it, or just say yay or nay on it. Is everyone fine with continuing to use Zoom for the time being for meetings, or does everyone want to get together and have a giant meeting with a bunch of people? Because I'm guessing the answer is no, and Zoom is fine. Pandemic aside, I had the mind that Zoom would probably be better anyway, because it's a little more controlled environment and people can take turns and go from there rather than having discussions. But it also doesn't let us have breakout sessions or personal asides or have the same form of discussion. So is anyone really focused on getting back and meeting in person? Not seeing any hands. All right, so future meetings will be scheduled by Zoom, I think, until further notice, until everyone's comfortable with not doing them by Zoom. So don't know when that's going to be. Next question, how often would everyone like to meet? We don't have a specific charge of being once a month or every other month or every other week or twice a month. It's how much work we think we need to do, or do we need to have a lot of work done at the start? Are folks going to be available at the start of the school year? I guess I would be open to suggestions on that, because I do think we have a bit of work to figure out where exactly we're going and getting pointed in the right direction, which I'm hearing a lot of good stuff here, but I'm also not necessarily aware of maybe what we should have on our second meeting agenda, other than some of the things we've already talked about today. So does anyone have any thoughts about those issues? Joel, I saw your hand up right away.
Yeah, so I guess because we are new as a group, I think we have to put a lot in the front end. So to me, I would think that we'd probably want to meet, I want to say, and I mean, I'm ready, I've been ready for this, maybe every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, just because I feel like, first of all, the size of our group, we have a lot to bring together. But I feel like we need to, like I said, just kind of do the work now. And if we do it once a month, I think, a lot of things may get lost. Not saying eventually we can't meet less, or as things come up, we decide, we meet more, or we flex our schedule. But I guess I would say we meet more often in the beginning. So I guess I would say every 2 weeks. And then if people can't show up, then maybe they show up, in 2 more weeks, just give people the option.
Yeah.
Everyone more or less good with that? Go ahead, Gina. Sorry, I cut you off.
Sorry, no, I'm too used to Zooms where I just talk when I want to. I'm sorry. So I would just agree with Joel that this is urgent and we can't let it drag out without making some moves soon. So I'm more than willing to meet with the every other week frequency. And I'm wondering if you could clarify for us whether it needs to be the whole ad hoc committee together each time in terms of like public notice for a board ad hoc meeting. And there was some discussion in the chat about breakout rooms, and in terms of that public notice, again, like if we go into breakout rooms, then it's not public. So if you could just clarify for us what our options are there, because I do agree.
I don't think that is a requirement. I think that we could have subcommittees of a ad hoc committee too. We could have people meeting on one issue to come up with a mission statement, and people meeting to come up with maybe the first couple of things we're looking at curriculum. I'm not opposed to any of that. I did see the message in the chat about breakout rooms, and I think they're a great idea. We use them in court and in mediation sessions all the time. The issue there is that that's not required to be public. So I don't know if we have the ability to facilitate multiple streams at the same time or to record multiple breakout rooms. But if we can do it, I'm not opposed to it. It's just making sure that we get everything up public as we have to. So my next question for everyone is, this was set up by me just coming up with a Google form, sending out a bunch of random dates and seeing which one the most people could attend. And this was the one that had the most responses in the affirmative. So is this a normal meeting time that is workable for most people, like a 5 o'clock meeting? I guess I'd ask that to know whether or not, if we can schedule our next meeting now, that might be at least one positive thing we can get done today too. Thoughts on that?
It's all positive, Mike. What are you talking about? So the week of the 21st.
Any specific day of the week work? I mean, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I mean,
Wednesday, Thursday works better for me than Monday, Tuesday.
Okay. Go ahead.
I like Mondays, but I think for me, 5 o'clock seems like a weird time just in terms of dinner and getting things prepared, especially with the kids in school and just kind of all that stuff. So just being cognizant of that. Now I know, isn't the school board, what time do you guys meet typically?
6 to midnight. I usually starts at 6 o'clock. If we're going to have meetings, it's on Mondays. And right now, we didn't have one yesterday, but who knows moving forward how many Mondays we'll take up.
So then knowing that, maybe we avoid Mondays, because doesn't the village meet on Mondays too?
Yep.
So I think we want to keep that open. So we as a committee can also, when the village has something going on, we can make sure we're part of that too, because that obviously affects us as well. So maybe we avoid Mondays, and then, like I said, it's more about the dinner thing and the kid thing around 5 for me.
Would it be easiest to send out another form with specifics for like the third week in September and kind of send out the same way and see which one works for the most people? Because I'm seeing just messages in the chat that it's not going to work for everybody, but we'll get it at a time that works for the most people. Is that doable?
Yes.
Seeing lots of thumbs up, that works. Leslie, go ahead.
Yeah, I like that idea. If you could send out. I like that idea if you could send that out. And I also like the idea that Joel had indicated that 5 o'clock, now that school is upon us, is a tough time. I'd say for me, what would work is maybe any 6 or any time after that.
Okay. Thanks, Leslie. Mike?
I was also wondering if when you send out, if we could maybe pin down some regular times too, so that we can start to schedule out a little further potentially, just so that we can get a sense of planning.
Yeah, I think we would be looking for a consistent time, right, Mike?
Yeah, I think that would be best.
Yeah, okay.
Predictable for everybody to be able to attend. I I've become very experienced at subtly muting myself while I talk to my children off camera, so sorry about that. That's kind of where we're at. Do we want to have any more specific discussion on specific things that we should have on our next meeting's agenda, which I'm anticipating will be in the next 2 or 3 weeks? Do we want to have some specific time where we talk about a mission statement or how to do anything like a survey, an equity audit? Brian, what's up?
Yeah, no, I mean, and you know this, Mike, our questions will be, what's going to be your charge? What are you guys doing? What's your vision when we're in board meetings? So I think that has to be something we have to establish by the next meeting. And if people want to take an attempt at it, so then we can sort of work through it for about 20 minutes. I think that's be the best bet instead of trying to do it as a group online. But as a board, they're all going to want to know what's your charge, what's your vision, what's your mission, what are you guys going to do?
Right.
So I think that is the first thing we need to knock out.
Well said. I have like four more hands to get to. The one thing I will say, just to make it clear and known for everybody, that if you're sending any emails out or anything like that, you should be aware that basically every single thing you're doing in writing for this committee could be considered a public record. So just be mindful that anyone in the public is going to be reading what you're writing. If you send something out to the group, if we have a listserv that we can send stuff out to, or if you're communicating about what we're doing on the committee. I know not everyone here is a public employee or is on a board or anything like that, so just keep that in mind. I have no idea the order of the hands that went up, so Gina, go ahead.
I was just going to bring back that potential agenda item of like common language, common understanding before we move on too much further. So perhaps for the next meeting.
Okay. Christy, go ahead.
I was thinking it also would be helpful to have an update from Tim on regards to what is happening curriculum-wise. I know that the district is working on with a variety of programs, so I think that it would be helpful to have some baseline information. And also, I'm thinking about the DPI data. I think it'd be really helpful for all of us to be aware of who our kids are. I often run into people who don't understand the makeup of our district. As a social worker, I can tell you we've got a lot of different families and things that are happening. So I think for this group, it's going to be really helpful to have some of that like tangible, this is our district data. This is what the administration has proposed or is already happening and doing, and then being able to move forward. And then one other tiny comment, I didn't get to put my hand up quick enough. I want to be really cautious with students. Having started Sonia Dore 6 years ago, or however many years ago it was, kids don't talk because they don't feel safe. And so I want to be really cautious. I have learned and been not necessarily, I don't want to say burned, but unintended consequences are real. And I just want to make sure that we're all cognizant if we do some kind of listening session and we do have kids say things, they are vulnerable, they are young, things get misinterpreted, simple things like documentation, you know, it is really, it goes far and quick. So that's just my cautionary statement. If we do some kind of listening panel, I'm very aware of how things might have unintended consequences over the years, watching some of the work that we've done kind of behind the scenes with students. So those are my 3 pieces. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Joel, go ahead.
Yeah, so I liked what Gina had to say. I think we need some common language, just so we're all speaking and hearing the same thing. I also believe that, you know, as this group or as this committee, we need to have a safe space. So for us to open up and talk about things, I think we definitely need some ground rules. Just like we would do that with youth, I think we need to do that with ourselves as well.
All right. I will add that to future agenda too. Thank you, Joel. Would it be, so one positive thing that I can tell everyone about is that should anyone on the board want anything on any board agenda, we have a policy. I think I wrote a couple of years ago that literally allows any board member to just ask anything be added to a board meeting so long as we have enough notice on it. This was brought up by Mel earlier that it would be great to have some showing of like an action item, some support from the district or the board for speaking about these issues in general. Would that be something the committee would like brought before the board soon, at least for some brief discussion there to put a public face on that this is endorsed and that we want this discussed? I mean, we had some brief comments by Mark Hetzel and Joan Ensign when this was authorized several months back about it, but there hasn't been anything recent about it. We had a board statement after the George Floyd murder came onto the scene. I know we've had staff who have asked for the district to make recent comments about things that are in the news in Wisconsin recently. And I think that the board and the district is supportive of everything we're doing here, but I acknowledge that it might be helpful to have something very public to endorse what we're doing here. So is that something that the committee would like the full board to deal with prior to our next meeting? I'm guessing the answer is yes, but I'm hoping you all say yes. Okay. So either Brian or I can ask that that be added to a future board agenda item. Maybe Brian can do it this time because it seems like I'm the one always asking stuff to get put on there. Sound good, Brian? All right, thank you. All right, so Joel, do you have something else you want to add, or did I just not put your hand down from the last time?
No, but you answered it though. I was just going to say yes. I think we need a public statement because I think that, you know, the community really needs to know. And I think maybe, I don't know, maybe we do an article in the Waunakee Tribune about, us, just so people know that we're there. Because I think a lot of people, and this is just based on the Want to Talk diversity group, some people have no clue about the ad hoc committee at all. Just because they're not paying attention or they don't fully understand. So I think definitely publicizing it. I think for Waunakee, it's a positive thing as well. That means we're being proactive. So
sounds good. All right. I think that took us through everything, and I made some promises that we would likely get through everything in 2 hours tonight. Hopefully we're not going to be going longer than 2 hours for most meetings, I don't think. Leslie, do you have anything else you wanted to add there?
I do. I like to recommend perhaps maybe there could be volunteers, a small committee that could maybe take a stab at drafting a purpose statement, mission statement, and a vision statement. And then perhaps maybe have something ready by the next meeting or sending out before for feedback. That's just a recommendation I would have, to have maybe a handful of committee members.
I think that's a great idea. If anyone wants to do that, email me and I will put you all together. Joel, go ahead.
Yeah, so obviously, we're part of the board, right? Obviously, we're not the board, we're part of the board. So we should really be incorporating what the school district has as a mission statement, right? Because our mission statement shouldn't be different than what the school district has. So we should probably utilize what's there. And then if we feel as a group that we need to add more, then maybe add more. But we definitely want to be aligned.
I agree. All right, so with that kind of takes us through our full-on agenda. The formulaic way we end meetings is we have someone make a motion to adjourn. So unless there's anything else we wanted to do. All right, hold on. Before I ask for it, go ahead, Gina.
So sorry, I was sitting here trying to decide if I wanted to just save this or not, but before someone adjourns, and then I have to hold my peace. I just want to be mindful of, I agree wholeheartedly that we want to have our community know that we're working on this, and I want students to know that we're not pushing this off, and I want families to know that the district cares about this and is prioritizing this. But I heard a student voice in that panel that teachers keep referring to, who noted that in response to criticism, there was but this is all the good that we're already doing. And so I just want to be mindful that we're ready to talk about who we are and what we're trying to do in a meaningful way, and not just put it out there that there's this group, because people have, and I'm, hearing, Joel, that you're saying that not everyone knows that it's taking place. And so maybe the time is now to just acknowledge that we're here. But I just wanted to put out there that lots of people know that this committee has been about to happen for a long time. And so I just want to be sure that we have something to say, and people don't just start to tune out, like, we know you have a committee. So thanks.
Sounds good. So the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn if anyone wants to make it.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Who made the second? I'm sorry, I didn't see. Tim, you got to make a motion. Fun. Or second. All right. All in favor? Hold on. I will try to figure out how to unmute you quickly so we can do that. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed can stay in the Zoom meeting after we leave. All right. That's what Dave does at every single board meeting, so I got to say it. Thank you, guys.
Thank
All
you.
right, take care, everyone.
Thank you.